The hyperscalers are wielding more and more power because chips and data centers and the amount of investment that needs to happen there, right? Ping, power, and pipe. The technology, the software technology. You layer in AI in a big way. And then you layer in the massive sales organizations that they have. They're becoming more and more dominant. It's shifting the power away from those partners I was talking about earlier that were doing those transactions, because now the largest distributors are going to be, over time, are going to be the hyperscalers, right? They are going to be the routes to market for ISVs and selling partners and everyone else, because I'm a customer and I'm going to make a decision about a solution that I need to acquire. It's almost going to be a pull, right? It's no longer going to be this push. I, as a customer, have decided I'm going to buy this security solution. I'm going with this hyperscaler, which I've already made a cloud commitment. And I need these 3 ISVs, and I have a systems integrator doing the work, and maybe I have a managed service provider who's providing my support after the fact. And I want to pull it all together, and I want to buy it through my cloud commitment. I want to decrement my cloud commitment. It's going to create a very different buying model than what we've seen in the past.
Learn how to master cloud marketplaces in just 5 weeks with our cohort course. Accelerate your growth by tapping into the $300+ billion cloud spend that enterprises have committed to AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Discover the future of go-to-market with Roman. During 10 weekly sessions, you'll learn how to leverage this fast-growing channel and network with top industry experts and partnership leaders. We will dive into marketplace strategies, internal buy-in, building relationships with the cloud, and mastering co-sell. Join our upcoming cohort.
Hi, Vince. Great to have you in our podcast. It's been a long time coming.
Roman, so good to be here today.
You have an incredible career in alliances and partnerships. You've been in Microsoft for many years, and then you've been leading alliances in a smaller company, but still very sizable. So can you walk us a little bit through your journey, and not only on a corporate side, but also as a creator and somebody who's been interviewing hundreds of partnership leaders across the globe? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your learnings, and how you've seen the evolution of partnerships through this lens.
I describe my career as 4 successful business transformations, and I'm on to the 5th right now. So I started off carrying a bag as a seller. I have a degree in marketing, but I realized the salespeople made a lot of money. Did a startup in the early days of wireless computing. We used I would call it more of an alliance strategy. It wasn't really true partnerships at the time, but I always recognized that having influencers help the customer make the right decision around my offerings. I followed a leader from that organization. I did a turnaround, and this company, I created a channel. I created a new market. I created a channel. And that was really when I cut my teeth into really partnerships and more formalized partnership strategies. That business, we grew exponentially. It led to the successful divestiture. We were taken out by Golden Gate Capital, and they made 5x within 26 months. I was then recruited by Microsoft, and at Microsoft, I led about 25% of the U.S. business for partners. I ran the verticals, which were federal, state, and local government, education, and healthcare. For the U.S. business. And I did that for 9 years. And I owned partners across all partner types, what we now call an ecosystem. I had all independent software vendors or SaaS vendors. I had all of the large transactional partners of Microsoft. I owned the SIs, the global SIs, as well as the regional SIs, and basically partners of all types. And I wound up sitting on the U.S. partner leadership team. So I had a really great purview into how Microsoft operated. I have a lot of institutional knowledge that I share with organizations about that. And then when I left Microsoft at the end of 2016, they blew up my business and I didn't want to move to Seattle. I decided to focus in here. I started the podcast because I realized there wasn't a lot of great content around partnering, specifically with the hyperscalers, as we now refer to them. And I wanted to have an always-on channel. And so I started Ultimate Guide to Partnering. I started doing independent consulting. And then one of my clients was the largest software company in the nonprofit sector, and they asked me to come on board, and they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I went back inside for 2 years, and worked with a 5,000-person organization across the leadership team, across the sales organization. And I found from the inside, looking, having been on the other side at Microsoft and now on the inside of a fairly significant SaaS company, that organizations struggled even more than I thought around partnering. So I got another perspective. I was able to get them Partner of the Year status with Microsoft, but it wasn't without a lot of hard work, angst, anxiety, and struggle. And so I left during COVID because I wanted to get back out here. I wanted to be out here in front of this amazing community and help partners at scale to be successful. And that's when I came back as ultimate partner and brought the podcast back live again.
Looking at your experience and interviewing hundreds of partnership managers, I see this as a great example of being both actually high level top down, but also ground level bottom up. And I think it's a very important lesson for many partnership and alliance leaders. So I'm very curious, like what you learned through having this mindset and also through interviewing hundreds of people in your podcasts.
So with the premise of the podcast, I wanted to come at it from, here's the messaging that came out of the tech giant. And then what's the double click on that? And I find that partners themselves, in fact, are afraid to ask those questions or don't maybe know what the right questions to ask that leader. So when I've had leaders from the tech giants on, I'm very specific around like, what does this mean to a partner? How does a partner become successful with you? What are the best attributes of the partners you work with? And what would you say to them now if they failed or struggled working with you? So I ask questions that normally aren't asked in the room. And then I've interviewed some of the best partners. Like I've gotten to see it from both sides. I know the organizations that have been really successful, and I'll pick specific individuals or organizations out and invite them to come to the podcast. I'm very deliberate about that too. I don't have a lot of organizations on unless I think they're doing something really unique and different. And I want to like suss that out for the audience to say, this is what I'll call a pinnacle partner did better or differently than the like. And from that, I believe we've kind of culled out over the years a set of successful principles of what works and what doesn't work. And I group them by categories. I think it's principles first, tactics second. And from that body of work, there's 211 podcasts out today. We have a really great body of work about the success principles of partnering.
Can we double click on these success principles and kind of maybe also looking back at your own experience, right? So you worked on both sides, like you mentioned, and in Microsoft you said 4.6 billion ecosystem of, and then you led partnership in multi-billion-dollar company. What are those principles that you think are essential?
It's funny that because I always see people talking about, we were on LinkedIn together. We see a lot of tactic conversation. I start up here at these principles, and I believe these set of principles align to successful partnering. And I start with growth mindset. And people go, well, that sounds like a very woo-woo, like mindfulness mindset type of thing. But I had the fortune of being in the room with Microsoft and working with Dr. Michael Gervais when he was working with Satya Nadella. And I got to see the shift in the organization from the Steve Ballmer years to the Satya Nadella years and all that went into that. And I believe that organizations, and you know this, right? So many organizations, they want to get something out of the partnership, but they don't apply the right mindset and set of principles to doing that. And Microsoft has been a masterclass in successful partnering and growth mindset, leading with growth mindset. Satya got his leaders in the room. They were fighting with each other. And, these were alpha individuals that were all competing for resources, recognition, dollars to run their businesses, right? They were all running multi-billion-dollar businesses. And he really wanted to know what their personal purpose was, right? He wanted to get down to that because he had a bold mission for the company. He wanted to ensure that all those leaders were aligned to his purpose. He changed the compensation models. He flushed out all the bad actors or many of the bad actors in the organization. He changed the culture, and culture is so important to successful partnering. So I talk about it as growth mindset. I also talk about executive commitment. And one of the things I have found specifically, again, I talk about like going into organizations. If you don't have the leadership of the organization, the C-suite might say some things that are really, yeah, we believe in partnerships. They might tell their board, they might tell their shareholders how they believe in partnerships. They maybe believe in a strategy with Microsoft. But if the organization isn't fully committed, fully invested, if the C-suite, if you're not operating at the C-suite level, at the partnership level, you're not getting the executive commitment. I see it so many times with ISVs, right? They have an alliance strategy bolted on here. That's where they have their hyperscaler relationship. And then they might have a channel team. They might be big enough that they've got, thousands of partners that are reseller partners. The two organizations internally don't talk to one another. They're not aligned. And this is where I see when we'll talk about go-to-market strategies and hyperscalers and marketplaces. This is where I think we're at a seminal moment to change some of that. People like you and I having this discussion with these individuals and organizations to drive that. I can go through all of them individually. I'll touch on the others. It's super important that you have a vision for what you want to achieve. Again, vision might sound like woo-woo, but so many times organizations come together, they try to lock arms. They're not thinking about the big picture. They're thinking about the transaction ahead. And they're not thinking about how do we shape this partnership. So I think both internally you need to have vision so that you propel the commitment that you need within the organization. And then when you lock arms with a partner, you need to have like that vision statement that says, this is what we're going to go do together. These are the objectives and key results and the measurables and the accountables. So vision is super important. The next piece is maniacal focus. I have been in the room so many times, Roman, where I'm in the room with these top leaders. They've flown in, especially when I was at Microsoft, they'd fly to our big conference. They'd get the slide decks out. I'd be meeting with the CEO, their chief of staff, and so on. We'd lay out exactly what we wanted to do, and then nothing would happen. Like we'd each go back to our corporate respective offices, and nothing, like crickets. Like what happened there? Like everybody said all the great things, but nobody executed against it. So there's a whole series of things you need to do from a focus perspective to be successful. And then I move into, you've got to get your brand and story right. Like if you're working with the hyperscalers, these massive organizations, how do you build your brand and story? You have to put as much effort to selling to the hyperscaler as you do to your market and your customer. So how do you get your brand and story right? How do you then layer in like the results, the operational aspects of it, right? We talk about, how do I feed back up to the partner center, ACE and the like? How do I make sure that I'm relevant? How am I driving that flywheel? And then at the end of the day, when you've gotten it right, you've really achieved really great results, the tech giant's going to change their operational strategy, right? Microsoft announced marketplace first this year. They told the community basically you need to pivot. If you haven't done this already, you now need to lead with a transactable offer. So they had hundreds of ISVs that weren't doing transactable offers, big ISVs. Now those organizations are having to pivot, and this happens every few years, right? Technology changes, priorities change. So as an organization, you need to pivot. So those are at the principal level. And then for each one of these, there's certainly a set of tactics on how to be successful working with these organizations.
Very interesting. I love like what you said, having a vision, but also being maniacal focused. We talked in our course about needing to have like big vision, but also just looking at the next step. What is the next step? And takes it one step at a time. And they should work sort of from both sides. They need to work together, right?
Exactly. That maniacal focus means that we have a very strong locking of arms and cadence. And here's the other thing that happens too from that, right? So many times I have a partner development manager on one side, I have an alliance leader on the other side, and it's single threaded. And that is so wrong. That's how you're not successful, right? You need to literally get both of your organizations aligned, multi-threaded, so that there's accountabilities across multiple stakeholders on both sides of the partnership.
Can you like double click on how do you do that? Because I think it sounds intuitive, but you need to be intentional of doing that. Do you have any advice for companies?
I strongly advise organizations I work with to have set up a RACI. So they've lined up their responsibility, accountability, communicated it and informed. And then also to have up a steering committee within their own organization. So and lining up the accountabilities. For instance, if you are developing a product on one of the clouds, your product team needs to be engaged with the engineering team on the respective side. You need to drive, there needs to be a separate rhythm and communication flow there. On the marketing side, your CMO level person should be engaged with the marketing assets on the other side. Selling to selling, and then executive to executive. So at least at those 4 levels, you need to make sure that you basically created, and this is also how you get the right buy-in in the organization to drive the results you need to drive.
Let's shift gears and talk about sort of hyperscalers specifically and cloud go-to-markets and marketplaces in more details, right? So you had the front row seats of evolution of tech markets, evolution of partnerships. So from sort of your point of view, how would you maybe describe the evolution of tech landscape and emergence of cloud hyperscalers?
I have a little bit of history in my viewpoint here, right? A little bit of the windshield. I talk about the Bill Gates moment, the Boca Raton moment back in August of 1981. He really sparked this thing that we now call an ecosystem. I've recounted this to Jay McBain, in fact, in the work that conversations we've had. So when Bill Gates went to Boca Raton, he licensed software to IBM, didn't sell it to them. Licensing software became a new thing, by the way, at that point, right? At that point, it was tightly integrated to hardware. It was sold as a bundle, and there were agents that would sell a particular solution, but this became an ecosystem because IBM also licensed the hardware at the time. So Michael Dell starts making PCs in his dorm room, and Compaq is the fastest company to $1 billion. Then resellers happen, value-added resellers happen, transactional partners happen. All these things start evolving and evolved over time. Now launch in AWS in 06, I believe it was, decides to start selling shared time on their computer network, right? So now all of a sudden the cloud and IaaS becomes a thing, and then Google does the same thing. So they're all selling to this same hyperscaler ecosystem, as we might refer to it now, or cloud go-to-market, and things have really evolved from that point forward. I remember getting up on stage in it was still in the aughts, maybe the early teens, and having conversations with the channel about getting on board the cloud, right? And that wasn't moving as quickly. And I was early, when I was at Microsoft, I was one of the first people to do this thing we called co-selling. You see, before that, we weren't attributing ISVs to the business. We didn't know how to measure ISVs. So we understood that with the cloud, and when Azure first became a thing, we wanted to get those ISVs on our cloud, and we wanted to incent the sellers because we had 50,000 feet on the street that were engaged with customers, right? Microsoft became the new IBM, right? You always bought Microsoft. That's how you ran your enterprise. We wanted to get those ISVs, and that was our big calling card to the ISVs to move over to Azure, was we will bring you into accounts. We'll co-sell with you. In the beginning, partners were reluctant. They're like, Microsoft doesn't sell anything. The customer buys a license. They don't know how to sell our software. And so it went along for a period of time, and then this thing happened around cloud commitments and budgets. And you've been great chronicling the rise of the cloud commitment, right? $341 billion in durable cloud budgets amongst the top 3. We're not even including some of Microsoft's, right? We're kind of guessing where Microsoft is in a way, right? Because how they break things, they don't break it out by their platform as a service and their IaaS as a service, the way that, it's very discrete with the other two. But that 341 billion is available, and those decisions are now being made at the C-suite level. The CEO is now the new CIO, because now it's a transformational conversation that you're seeing happen, especially around AI. This last year really changed the game in many respects. So with Microsoft embracing Gen AI, and with Google's, fast follow, I'll call it, they were there first, but they responded. Now these conversations are happening about how do we use AI and transform our organization, right? It's changing the conversation in many respects. But that C-suite conversation, that CFO decision on $1 billion cloud spend is a very different decision than somebody buying discrete software in a line of business. And that's where this marketplace thing really takes off in a big way. So this evolution is very interesting to see. next week I'm at this event where I'm getting in front of a bunch of traditional channel partners that are used to selling PCs and Targus bags and having a conversation about why they need to get on board with marketplaces. And it's going to be astounding. I love the fact that you and I are chronicling this because it's going to be an astounding 3 years.
I cannot agree more. And we'll talk about channel partners in a bit. But you mentioned Microsoft announced this last year to be the year of marketplace, which is this year. Two other hyperscalers are following, and you've been interviewing, I think, leaders from all of them, right? So how do you see the similarities and differences? Like how would you explain it between those three? Are they all the same?
Each of the three organizations came at the world differently, right? Google came out of the world of search and our data, leveraging our data, right? Being in advertising. That's how they started. That's their genesis. Amazon came at it from being a retailer, and then as a retailer selling their servers, basically. And Microsoft came at it from that conversation I mentioned, the Bill Gates moment, where they always realized that they were first of all, they were selling box software in the beginning. And then when Microsoft entered the enterprise, which wasn't really until the late 90s, right? In a big way, they created enterprise agreements and they went after that market, and they realized that they didn't have the ability that they were running SAP on the back end. This is a little inside baseball. They were running SAP on the back end, and they didn't have the transactional horsepower to process all these enterprise agreements. So they created a category of partner called large account reseller, LAR. Those partners were the ones that owned all of those enterprise agreements. And they still, to this day, many of those enterprise agreements are transacted through those large account resellers. They have a different name for them now. And so that's how they came at the market. And then AWS was selling discrete cloud services. Microsoft was still selling enterprise licenses. And then Google came in and they followed the AWS model first. So the differences are really how they came after the markets. I would say that they become more similar to each other over the last few years. A lot of it's the cross-pollination of, AWS, I think, has been certainly earlier to more aggressive in ISV. I'd say they've done a better job on the ISV side, but they don't have the collaboration software that Microsoft and Google have, right? So there's a stickiness to that collaboration software. It's helped both Google and Microsoft. And so Microsoft and Google have a little bit of a surround strategy with their cloud services around their collaboration technologies, if you will. Where AWS has come at it, listen, they had a 3 or 4 year head start on everybody else. They've done what I find differently about AWS is if they want to do something, you write a 6-page paper and it gets done, it gets funded. That's good. Where Microsoft and Google move a little bit more slowly in those respects. But what you also see in AWS is pockets of programs or initiatives where it's a little bit more like government in Microsoft and Google, where it's got to get institutionalized across the organization first, and then it's released. And so that's why I think that's why I think AWS has been able to iterate a little bit more quickly, because they'll start off with a pilot or an initiative, and then they mainstream it, and that's helped them be and stay ahead of the curve with the other two.
Great breakdown. I love you sort of referring back to the history and tracing it to these days. You mentioned 341 billion of cloud commits, and I found that not only just astonishing number, but also the fact that it's actually growing really fast is even more impressive. How do you think this number, cloud commits, and the power of hyperscalers is changing go-to-market strategy for companies, partnership strategy for companies?
Well, we didn't talk about the tectonic shifts and the economic headwinds, right? So we've all seen this. Let's go back 4 years from almost today. It was this month, I think, that we really got hit with COVID and the world changed, right? We saw 7 years of transformation in 7 months. That has accelerated technology adoption in many respects. But we've also been seeing economic headwinds, right? During COVID, there was an overinvestment, and then organizations had to pull back, right? Because they overinvested, and then they realized when they came back out that they may be overinvested. They hired too many bodies. They bought too much technology, and they had to recoil a little bit. So those economic headwinds have impacted the ability of some of the tech firms to be successful. Last year, we saw close to half a million layoffs last year. I think the number was 483 or 493,000 people were impacted. That also said that these organizations had to do more with less. And then layer on top of that the cookie and the millennial buyer who doesn't want to talk to a salesperson. And how do you get to the customer more effectively than through partnerships? How do you get to them more effectively than if you're an ISV trying to sell that maybe a relationship with a hyperscaler that owns $1 billion cloud commitment with that customer gets you access to budget that you normally wouldn't be available because of all the recoiling that's happened. So it's a very interesting set of circumstances. And the power I talked about the power of the hyperscalers. If you back up, many of the organizations you and I know, like they were operating within their solar systems or, their universes. But when you really back it up, the universe, the hyperscalers are wielding more and more power because chips and data centers and the amount of investment that needs to happen there, right? Ping power and pipe. The technology, the software technology. You layer in AI in a big way. And then you layer in the massive sales organizations that they have. They're becoming more and more dominant. And this is happening now, and it's shifting the power away from those partners I was talking about earlier that were doing those transactions, because now the largest distributors are going to be, over time, are going to be the hyperscalers, right? They are going to be the routes to market for ISVs and selling partners and everyone else, because I'm a customer and I'm going to make a decision about a solution that I need to acquire. It's almost going to be a pull, right? It's no longer going to be this push. I, as a customer, have decided I'm going to buy this security solution. I'm going with this hyperscaler, which I've already made a cloud commitment. And I need these 3 ISVs, and I have a systems integrator doing the work, and maybe I have a managed service provider who's providing my support after the fact. And I want to pull it all together, and I want to buy it through my cloud commitment. I want to decrement my cloud commitment. It's going to create a very different buying model than what we've seen in the past in our technology sector.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's such a massive rebalance of the entire tech sort of ecosystem, and it's been staggering to watch as well, because I think, especially during COVID, maybe before COVID, there was a lot of conversation about startups, kind of emerging tech companies, and now all of a sudden you see this giants wielding their power, right? I think one of the arguments about hyperscaler marketplaces is that it's very appealing for enterprise customers, despite some people thinking that it's like a small companies listing the products, that all of them are focusing on cross-sell. When do you think this will include SMBs and smaller companies, so they would also can take advantage at scale from hyperscaler marketplaces?
I think what I call is the messy mid-market, right? The mid-market is also included here, right? Because the enterprise is narrow. It's maybe the top 11,000 organizations globally. And then the SMB is about 150 million, people like organizations like yours and mine, smaller to a certain number of seats. But then there's also this mid-market opportunity. So what I would say first about the mid-market opportunity is it's there right now. In fact, I've been calling it the acre of diamonds. There are probably, I know in the Microsoft world, and I'm sure that Google and Amazon replicate it the same way. There's probably about 30 to 35,000 organizations that fall in that mid-market. And these are organizations that are maybe significant in size. In fact, many ISVs would probably consider them enterprise, but they're not managed as enterprise customers by the largest hyperscalers, because the number keeps going up, right? When Boeing signs $1 billion agreement on cloud commitment, it pushes up the number higher and higher, so more companies fall into that mid-market. So I think there's a unique opportunity. Organizations like Microsoft, I had Kevin Piesker do an event with me. He is very focused on partners, and it's underpenetrated. It's an underserved community. So there's a huge opportunity for partners to get on board there. How do they get there? They might get there through their own direct sales organization, or they might get there through a multi-party offer. So there's a very interesting move where an ISV and a transactional partner or an SI or whoever the partner type might be get to the customer that way. And I see that also in the SMB world. I think that this Microsoft calls it multi-party MPO, Amazon calls it, AWS calls it what, PPO. And I think that is a way to get to that market more effectively to buy, right? And so I can be working with Bob, the local implementer, to clinicians in Northern California, and that person might be the solution provider to me, and that he's going to bring in that offer to me. So I do think whether they have large cloud commitments or not, that this marketplace offering, bundling together of solutions is going to be effective even in the SMB market.
Do you think marketplaces will create some sort of a pool of customers actually proactively searching products on marketplaces, or there's still going to be some sort of enterprise-ish sales motion in addition to being listed? Because the dream for everyone is to have this flywheel. You just list and you just enjoy yourself and everything being sold.
I do think it's both, right? Just the same way that the internet did not replace sales. There was a big, like, the death of sales when the internet became a thing, right? We're not gonna have salespeople anymore. We're just gonna all go to the internet and buy things. That didn't happen. You still needed the assist. The role of the seller changes, right? Because it's an assist. The partner role becomes more important because partners need to work with one another. They need to have that strategy so that when the customer makes that buying decision, they're all lined up the right way. So the roles change. But the discoverability is going to be that's where the conundrum lies now, right? Because there's going to be millions of marketplace offerings out there. And then how do I find yours? Same way, how do I SEO? How do I find your website? Partner insight, right? How do I find that? So there's going to be a little bit of that. There's going to be a little bit of assist. There's going to be a little bit of partnership and community around influencing the decision process. The way Jay McBain likes to talk about the 8 seats at the table, right? There are going to be people that help influence that process at the SMB level, at the mid-market level, and at the enterprise level.
Reference to internet is such a good point, and I cannot agree more with you. So when you hear people trying to get traction on cloud marketplaces or through like collaboration with hyperscalers, what are the things that they typically sort of undervalue or don't focus that much that they should be focusing on?
It's a really great question. I think that we're so early in the conversation. I would say from a maturity perspective. Now, John Yonke, I asked him this. John Yonke from Tackle. I asked him where we were in the life cycle in terms of adoption. I still think we're earlier than some people think. John likes to say we are crossing the chasm. I don't think we're crossing the chasm yet. I do think the maturity model is different for different organizations. It might be different for CrowdStrike and Snowflake and some of the others that did $1 billion last year with AWS. But for a lot of ISVs, they're still early in adoption. There's still been some reluctance, hesitancy, and I'm only doing it because I have to, or because a customer is asking me to buy off of it, right? I mean, you're still seeing some of that. And what we haven't looked at yet enough is that marketing piece that we talked a little bit about with brand. That how do I show up? How do I think about leveraging now that I'm on a marketplace? Do I brand that back to the hyperscaler? Do I brand that to my customer? Do I brand it to my market? Right? I don't see enough of that happening. Do you?
I agree with you, and I think there's some companies who kind of cross the chasm, right? Clearly, I mean everyone is still early, but I think from hyperscalers' perspective, they feel that they cross the chasm, like kind of considering the entire traction that they see from tech ecosystem. I think they just pass this threshold, but many companies are not fully sort of in this, right? Like to the extent, like for example, Microsoft is full in, or like AWS is full in sort of they double down on, or GCP double down on marketplaces. And I think what is probably missing for some companies is getting like this initial traction, like a couple of wins and communicating them really well to internally, externally, so they get everyone excited. We just had a call and somebody shared that they had like a couple of wins and they accelerated deal for like 12 months. And when sellers heard that somebody accelerated deal for like 12 months, they like, oh, like how do I get to marketplace? And I think this is like this maybe not enough wins communicated prominently of the skill.
I think the ones you talked about who've crossed the chasm have figured it out, right? I've talked to some of those organizations and their sellers figured it out, right? And I talk about like everybody in the room, the commitment up and down the organization. When the seller figures it out, that they can get access to a budget that they didn't know existed, and they start driving that engagement. That's when I think it pulls everything else across with it, pulls everybody across the chasm.
You mentioned channel partners, right? And partners like at large a couple of times. And I'm curious, like, because we see this evolution of go-to-market and evolution of channel partners in a big way. And they, like if ISVs are struggling to figure it out, I think channel partners are feeling even more pressure, right? So what's your sense, like where it's going? How do you think the role of channel partners evolving, how it will evolve? Like what's your thought on that?
There was a lot of kicking and screaming last year. I will tell you that, right? A lot of the larger transactional partners and the ones that were used to selling discrete licenses or selling a solution a different way directly to the customer, SaaS solution directly to the customer, are kicking and screaming on the marketplace because a few things happen, right? They no longer own the transaction, so that if you're a publicly traded company, I'm talking about the bigger ones, it changes the dynamic on your revenue number, or how you attribute revenue. So that was an issue. It's still an issue for some, but they're recognizing that they need to come along. A lot of those are recognizing they need to come along. And then there's the long tail, the thousands and thousands of other systems integrators, resellers, whatever their attribute is. There's so many different categories these days. They're coming along more slowly. And what I find with the bigger ones, there are the fast adopters, there's the middle tier, and then there's the laggards in those categories. And I suspect we're going to see the same thing in the long tail, where there will be fast adopters. Those ones I think are going to lean in. They're going to grow considerably. The mid-market kind of still trying to figure out their business model and adapting their business model to the change, right? The revenue models are different. And then also the laggards. And I think we're seeing that on both. I would agree that we're seeing it on both. I got to, from a large partner perspective, I was with D. Berger and Tony Savoyan. So Insight is probably the most fast forward of those large resellers. They've already recognized, and they have thousands of ISVs that are part of their, they work with, and they pull that together. They basically created their own marketplace, transactional, to their customer, and they wrap around the services. So they're really only creating their own marketplace, transactable offers, and they're working with the hyperscalers there as well. So they figured it out. And then there's going to be the ones below that have not figured it out, or may not even come on board. Maybe figure that they've got a few years of time left. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Very interesting. Microsoft called them the partners who lean in, right? Microsoft, I think, called them sort of modern partners, right? So what do you think is sort of characteristics of those partners who jump on this trend the fastest? And like, what maybe if you have any insights, maybe you would drill into type of partners who do you think are poised to get the most out of cloud marketplaces?
I come back to the principles. So some of the people I've interviewed over the years have been people like Tony Savoyan from SADA Systems. I've known Tony when he was a Microsoft partner and I was managing him in my organization. And he was one of my first guests, and he's been a guest now 6 times. And When I think about executive commitment, when I think about mindset, when I think about some of those things, I think about SADA Systems as an example. We called them an early born in the cloud partner. But Tony's organization got that right early. They understood their relationship to the hyperscaler. They also recognized that they could just sell the hyperscaler services, or they could layer in ISV solutions and manage service offerings and other things to how they went to market. So they were early that way. Again, commitment, vision, maniacal focus, branding. They did a great job of branding back to the hyperscaler. They doubled down on Google. They became the preeminent Google partner, 6 years, award-winning partner of the year. And that's why Insight acquired them last year. And December 1st, they acquired them because Insight said, well, we want to be multi-cloud. We don't just want to be a Microsoft shop any longer. How do we get to be Google's #1 partner fastest? And that's when they acquired SADA. So I think the attributes are the same on those fast followers. They're the ones that have the growth mindset, commitment, and they follow all the principles down to the end.
Let's talk about the future. We see this massive shift towards cloud go-to-market. I think it might be more obvious from our standpoint than for some other people. But if you would try to kind of project this in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you think we will be in 3 years?
I love this because the future is going to be exciting, right? It's been exciting. It's been exciting for a long. That's why I got into tech. I love the excitement. I love the change, right? Everything we evolve things so more rapidly in the tech sector, and everybody else comes along. It's going to be interesting to see this evolution of the partners in the channel that we talked about. The things that I think are missing are some of the technologies and ways that we get to the end goal that we were talking about earlier, where the customer says, I want to buy these 5, 6, or 6 things, and I want to decrement my Mac agreement or my cloud commitment. And then how do I do that? How do I automate that process? How do multiple selling organizations, like partner organizations or partners with each other, how do they figure it out? How do they come together? Like, for instance, if I'm selling to this mid-market customer over here, who are the 5 partners that are going to call on that customer? And who are the salespeople in each one of those partners that are calling on that customer? And how do I line up my territories? And how do I know who my hyperscaler person is? And how do I stitch that all together, right? So that we can effectively go sell something together. Right now, the technology really doesn't exist for that. There are some people out there, there are organizations like PartnerTap, Reveal, Crossbeam that are doing some of this, but really getting it to that level of specificity, end to end, to the hyperscaler, that's missing right now. And if I was in the technology, if I was on the other side, I'd be building that right now. I think that when Jay talks about his islands of automation in our sector, I think there's a huge opportunity there.
No, I agree. But do you think hyperscalers, sort of marketplaces, are essentially vehicle to facilitate that, or do they think it will be like orchestrated somewhere else?
It's a really good question. I think there's going to always be a push and a pull, right? Somebody has to get up in the morning and sell something, and a customer has to go solve a business need. So there's going to be push and pull. So how do you effectively do both? And I don't have the answer to that. I just think it's an interesting conundrum.
Right, because I see that hyperscalers essentially try to build technology and try to pull together the sellers and ISV sellers and partner sellers, right, in sort of one virtual kind of room, so they would collaborate more.
But they only could do that at the enterprise level. And when you look inside of Microsoft, one of the things I will tell you is the organization is not scaled the way you would expect for a company of its size and reach, right? I'll give an example. The U.S. education business, I'm probably telling numbers out of school here. There's probably 60 sellers in the U.S. education business for Microsoft. There are 60,000 school agreements between higher education and the grades that Microsoft owns. So how do you effectively reach that audience? So if I'm if I'm an ISV and I'm selling a solution to drive results in higher education, how do I get to that customer effectively? It's not just the hyperscaler. I need all of those influencers. I need to stitch that entire team together and go after that market.
That is an amazing point.
I'd love to get your perspective on it. What do you think are going to be the biggest challenges and opportunities for us?
I wouldn't underestimate clouds, to be honest. I think you're right that they want this to be more self-serve, potentially, right? So they're moving towards like marketplace, self-serve. How do we orchestrate more rather than doing like cross-sell? I think right now, the more emphasis on enterprise, cross-sell, and so on. It would be interesting to see like how they will crack that, because I think the amount of pool they make is like pretty significant. And if you like think from a customer lens, if you're a customer, you made these commitments, you kind of learn that you can use that to buy software on the marketplaces. Your first impulse would be just to go and search marketplace and so on. But yeah, I think you cannot truly cover the entire ecosystem with few marketplaces.
I have one client in particular I'm thinking of right now who actually has built a very strong self-serve model, doesn't rely on co-selling today, wants to, but doesn't rely on co-selling today, and is effectively selling like 500 solutions a week off of the marketplace at 18,000 customers now. And he's effectively doing it through digital marketing. And so, yes, maybe that's the shift we're going to see, to your point.
Maybe to close up, I think we've been talking like for almost an hour, and we haven't touched AI even tangentially. When I think about AI and also like this cloud go-to-markets, they, in my mind, occupy almost like different buckets. But I think they somehow like overlap, maybe in a major way. So how do you think about like AI versus the cloud go-to-markets? How AI will influence, accelerate, or sort of impact in any way?
It's certainly, I mentioned the CEO becoming the new CIO. It's changed the conversation to more of a board level conversation, right? Because now everybody's saying, I want to effectively utilize AI, whether it's to streamline services, reduce cost, provide better support, a better customer experience, and so on, and also to stay ahead of my competition, right? So I think Microsoft was smart to get in early. Satya made some really great moves there. It was a master class last year. Google followed suit. They're embedding AI into everything, right? Copilot and all the technologies, and they're telling ISVs to come on board with their AI solution. Of course, that also locks the ISV into a particular cloud, so there's some benefit, some residual benefit there. It was interesting because Jay and I had a conversation about this a week ago. He thinks that it's getting overplayed in a way. That yes, AI is going to be embedded in everything over time, but the initial opportunity for partners is maybe not as great as the $4 trillion that Satya said to the street a few weeks ago. I think it's somewhere in the middle, right? I think the technology is useful. Maybe it's gotten overplayed a little bit. We're in the hype stage still. It will be embedded. I like what I'm seeing with Copilot and some of the other technologies embedding it. We're all using it somewhat effectively, some maybe not. We'll see. I don't have a definitive answer on like, is it going to blow up everything else? It will ultimately, but I think it has gotten a little bit overhyped, just a little bit overhyped.
I agree to your points on Satya. I think you need to have a vision, right? Like you said, I think the vision, and he's actually great in outlining the vision and also builds this ecosystem, instill an ecosystem mindset in the organization. I think AI drives more cloud adoption, kind of faster, using and putting data on the cloud, because all data, they all should be somewhere in adjacent places, like either on cloud or sort of on-prem. I think everyone sort of now sees as AI is going to be hosted on clouds, so it drives cloud adoption. It may drive my marketplaces adoption as well, because I think it may kind of make it like everything easier. Instead of someone building a customized solution, AI at some point may offer you like, here's a list. I think might be good for you.
Yeah, the discoverability will be in AI. AI will help you with the discoverability for sure.
Now it's like just so many moving pieces. So it's to be seen, but definitely very interesting new brave world. Vince, I love the conversation. I think we need to do like this every 3 months at least to dig deeper. And thank you so much for joining us today and sharing kind of your insights, experience, and I think you have so much depth of knowledge.
Thank you so much, Roman. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you.